Hey everybody, I'm Den Haring and welcome back to my channel, Fish Den 365. Recently I was just out on Lake Wallenpaupack doing a night fishing bite. It's May now. It was May 21st, Friday night when I went out. This is the time of year when the stripers are up eating the alewives. The alewives are spawning. And so I was at Wallenpaupack, and the video I want to make today is going to be about how to catch these fish when the conditions are not optimal, when maybe you have a bright moon or there's some wind blowing the water and it's difficult to understand or know where the alewives are and how they're spawning and how the fish are relating to them, because that's exactly what happened to me on Friday night. And so there's a number of things you can do to put the odds in your favor when you're fishing for these things during the alewife bite. So this video is specific to that. How about that, huh? So when it comes to fishing in May and June at nighttime for these stripers that are eating the alewives, you have to try and put the odds in your favor, because even though it's easy to find the fish on most nights because you'll hear them blowing up on the bait, it's still not always easy to catch them, and sometimes they're not blowing up on the bait at all. And that was kind of what I experienced a bit on Friday, and I think there was a couple reasons for that. Number one was I got there at 11 at night, and when I first got to my spot, there were a couple of fish popping on the alewives. It was sporadic. It was just a few. I think they were hybrids because they were right against the bank. I heard them blowing up, and then within half an hour, 40 minutes, it really shut down. There was still a few alewives circling on the surface, but there wasn't a ton of them. And the moon was up high. It was about 2/3 full, and it was bright. And the main lake had a good west wind on it. Now my first spot was back in an area that was protected from the wind, and that's number one. You want to find, when you have a windy night and you're trying to find this topwater bite, the best thing to do is find an area where that wind is minimized somehow. It might be behind a point, for example, or back in a cove, somewhere where you can get out of that wind and still find out if those alewives are up and if anything's bashing on them. Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes it's just so darn windy you can't do much about it. And so when that happens, I forget about the topwater bite and I go to a minnow lure. I'll go to a jerkbait like a bomber long A. Something like that usually works pretty well. In fact, that saved my night many times when I was out over the years where we had windy conditions or a high bright moon. I'd throw the bomber long A and get that thing down a little bit and catch them that way. So that's always one way you can go. The other thing, more importantly perhaps, is if you have the luxury to do this, don't go out on those nights. Pick nights where the weather has been stable, where maybe you have a prefrontal condition, where you have that humidity that's pretty high, calm water, low light, new moon, fishing around the new moon. If you have the luxury of picking your nights, then don't pick a night where you think it might not be that good because the weather's not going to be very cooperative or the moon's going to be too bright. Now, for a lot of us, that's not a possibility because we don't have unlimited fishing time, and so we work and that kind of thing. So that was the case for me Friday night. I was going to either make it or break it Friday night, one way or another. So I was very disappointed by 11:40 when this bite had shut down, because prior to that, a couple nights before, they were really busting from what I saw on the internet and Facebook. And then I noticed, I did go back and check Facebook afterward, like on that Friday and even the following Saturday. Much less reports on the night bite coming out on those few days. So I know that the weather had an effect on those fish. And I had to figure out what I was going to do. And so one of the things was to hit a number of different areas, because you just never know. Maybe a different spot on the lake, you can get a different population of alewives and they're more active, and maybe there's some stripers there. And so that's what I started to do. I started to hit different areas. I went to a point that I've caught stripers on before, and it was dead. It was even deader than the first spot that I was at. And so then I went to another spot that I had very high confidence in, caught them there at night before, and again, nothing. Couldn't get them to bite. So I stopped throwing a top water and I went to this. This is just a standard Matt Allen jig head with a Kitech swing impact fat. That's a bluegill color, but it actually looks like a good alewife color. It's got that dark bluish back and silvery sides. And so I threw this for a while, and I did get bit on it, but I think it was either rock bass. They were chewing on the tail, It was just small fish. I can just feel them biting on it. Or it may have even been alewives trying to mate with the darn thing. I think that was happening with this too. I was throwing it real shallow against the point and then just letting it go to the bottom and then retrieving it back slowly. But I did not catch anything doing that either. And so by now, it's getting close to 2 o'clock, and yeah, I don't have any fish in the boat, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better. And I start thinking about, well, maybe I should save my energy for some other night and just go on home. But I was kind of invested at that point, so I decided to stay out there, and I'm glad I did because, I went to another spot. And when I did, as soon as I got there, there were alewives working the shoreline there. And I heard that, and I also heard a couple of walleyes blowing up on them. You can tell the walleyes, they sound different than the stripers and the hybrids. It's a much more subtler douche when they come up and eat the bait. And so there were a few walleyes working in there. I had a walleye on, I think, at one point on one of my baits, and then it got off. But then, and the moon was continuing to go down behind the mountain, behind the hillside there. And as it got darker and darker, the stripers started moving in. And some of these smashes got to be much, much louder. And I realized, okay, there's some stripers moving in. And let me just show you the baits that I was throwing. I had 5 rods rigged up. And so the first one was this one. This is always one of my top striper baits. It's a Cordell Redfin. It's a wake bait. It just you just reel it real slowly across the surface. You can see this one's been chewed up quite a bit over the years. It's got a lot of teeth marks on it. Even the decal's worn out on it. But I put a decal on there to give it a little bit of flash. And don't know if it makes a difference or not, but it gives me a little more confidence in the bait sometimes. But and I started throwing that one right away when I first got there, when there were a few blowups. But nothing was interested in that. I also had another lure here that I modified recently. This is a Cordell lure that you walk the dog with. I really, really, really like the eyes in this bait. Look at that! Look at how big the eyes are. Really nice. This is a Cordell Badonkadonk, I believe is how you pronounce this bait. And I modified it. I drilled a hole in the back and glued the rattles together because I don't like my baits making a lot of noise. When I hear these alewives doing this at night, and the fish start getting really conditioned to that, there's no metallic noises or anything. It's just the natural noise of the alewife on the surface. And so that's why I modified this bait. I threw this for a while, nothing on that. Another thing that I threw, which is a little unusual, but I like to experiment, sometimes to my own detriment, because sometimes I think I experiment a little too much, but I've had times where I experimented and it really paid off. It won tournaments for me because I was willing to try something different, for example. So this is a Zoom horny toad, a little topwater bait. Kind of sounds like a buzz bait. I love this thing for bass, smallmouths and largemouths. It has a real subtle surface sound when it's buzzing along, and it catches a lot of fish. And I just thought that maybe when those alewives are active, maybe when the stripers first come in, they'd be interested in chasing this down. Because you just throw it out there and you reel it back in at a pretty good pace so that it's along the surface buzzing along. And I did try it when those stripers first started coming in on that last spot that I went to, or the second last spot. When I started hearing them pop, I threw this and I thought, maybe I'll get bit on it. They didn't want it. Couldn't get anything to come after that. I also threw this for just a little bit. I want to experiment with this a little more. This is a soft plastic jerk bait. This is bear with me here, a Zoom fluke. And what I do with this when there's not a lot of weeds, I nose hook it. I put a little spring clip in the nose of the bait, and then I put the hook through that spring clip so it can't come out. And I just nose hook the bait, kind of like you would live bait. I throw it out there, and this thing has a great action. You can retrieve it fast along the surface, or you can let it sink a little bit, and it just has an injured baitfish look to it, and that color is a good alewife color. I did throw it. I didn't throw it real long, but I didn't get bit on it either. And then finally, the last bait. I also had a 6th rod that. So far I've shown you 4 of them. I'm going to show you a 5th bait. I had a 6th rod that wasn't rigged with anything because I thought I might end up changing what I do throughout the night based on the conditions. I threw this bait for a bit. This is a homemade popper that a friend of mine has made. He made me a bunch of them. I really like this bait. I've caught hybrids on it before. Has a really nice look to it. You can see that shine on there, nice tail feather. And Alan Carl, if you're out there watching, thank you. I still throw this bait and it still catches fish, but not on this night. So the only lure that caught anything for me the entire night was this one. And for you who are familiar with my channel, you know I'm crazy about this lure. This is a Norman Top Dollar. It's got that real thin profile like an alewife is built. It's about the same size as the alewives at Wallen Paul Pack. And I just throw it out there, and I just, usually what works best is just a steady, real slow cadence. Doom, 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 and it spits and it walks the dog at the same time. And it actually sounds a little bit like those alewives. And I was able to catch 2 rock bass on this thing. I caught a purebred striper on it, and then I moved to another spot, the spot I began at, and they were in there later at night. This was like 4 in the morning, and I caught 2 hybrids there on it. I didn't catch any giants on this particular night out, but I was happy to catch what I caught, especially after the first few hours where I just couldn't come up with anything. We're hooked up, folks. He's trying to get me into this tree. I don't want him to get me in the tree. I want him over here. Oh boy, he's taking me to pillar to post now. Oh man, he's going halfway to Holly. Not that big. I'm trying to get on the motor on me now. I chipped that foot. Yeah, I know your tricks. I know your tricks. I know your tricks. Yeah, come on. He's pretty good. Yeah, he's better than I thought. Oh yeah, nice one. Got me a spiny. Man, does he ever hook bad though? Oh gee whiz. That sucker waves now. Out here as best we can. There's bigger ones out here. Let's put this one back. Purebred. That one. He's good. He hit it twice. That's very unusual. Because he's a dumb little guy. but he's strong. It's like they all are. Let's get this one in the boat. This is a hybrid. Got him. Oh, he's making a mess of the whole thing here. Got him. Nice little hybrid here. Alrighty. Oh, is he ever hooked? Well, boy, that's good. Good, good, good. We got you. We got you. We got you. We got you. Nice little hybrid. hybrid. So I'm looking forward now to going out there again, and again I'll be watching the conditions and hoping for a darker night, clouds or whatever, and some calm water and the alewife spawn, and hopefully we can whack a few more. But this bait here is a killer. It's out of production. You can't get it anymore at the stores, but every now and then it'll show up on eBay. And if you can get your hands on one, they're worth getting if you start to learn how to work this bait. It doesn't just catch stripers and hybrids, it catches everything, largemouth, smallmouth. I've caught lots of fish on this bait, and I have a ton of confidence in it too as a result. But yeah, that's what it took. I had to spend some time being patient and waiting for the right conditions, and then hitting the right spots where there were some fish. There wasn't a ton. It wasn't like one of those nights where it sounded like Pearl Harbor out there. But after about 2:15, there was enough fish to keep my interest, to keep me out there till about 4:30. By then I was pretty exhausted and decided to call it a night. But I'm looking forward to getting out there again. When I do, I'll probably take the camera along and video that and let you know how things are going there and how the bite is changing as this bite goes on. I think the stripers actually get a little harder to catch because they start to key in more and more on that circling of the alewives, a little spawning ritual that they do. I think early when they first come in May, and even early in the evening when they first come into an area, they're a little more vulnerable than they are after they've been chewing a while. But that doesn't mean you can't catch them. You just have to keep at it, keep throwing, and some nights are different than others. Some nights they don't seem to have any interest in lures much at all, and then other nights you can catch them pretty regularly on lures. So you just never know. You just got to get out there, give it a try, experiment a little bit. Don't be afraid to try some different things if what you're throwing is not working. I know there's a lot of people that throw Zara Spook and do well with that. I have plenty of those. I had those with me. I just didn't feel that I had a need for it once they started eating the Norman Top Dollar for me. So anyway, you can take a look at some of the video of the fish I caught. And one rock bass I caught, I think the first one, it was either filled with eggs or filled with alewives. It had a really fat belly for the size of the fish. Always interesting to catch the different species out there. Well, I hope you found the video helpful. If you did, please hit that like button. That helps me, me get more attention on YouTube. The algorithm, the way it works, the more likes you get, the more your video gets put out there in front of others, and I would appreciate it if you hit the like button for me. That helps me out a lot, makes me feel good. And also, if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. When you do, hit that bell. That'll give you a notification for when the next video is coming. I hope to be making some more and more now and getting a little more regular with this as time goes on. And look forward to getting out there on the water. Remember, we're certified Bassified, and as always, may God bless your fishing endeavors.